I am Tyler, 34 years old, and I never thought my career as a real estate attorney would prepare me for defending my own home against my family. 5 years ago, I purchased a fixer-upper that I poured my heart savings and countless weekends into renovating. When my parents called requesting a family meeting at my house, I expected good news, maybe retirement plans or a family vacation. Instead, they dropped a bombshell that shattered our relationship. Before I continue this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit that like button and subscribe to support more real stories like mine about standing up for yourself when family crosses the line. Growing up in suburban Michigan, our family appeared normal from the outside. We lived in a modest 3-bedroom home in a neighborhood filled with similar houses and families. My parents, Richard and Linda, worked steady jobs, dad as a factory supervisor and mom as an elementary school administrative assistant. We never had extravagant things, but we had enough. From my earliest memories, however, there was always a clear favorite in our household. My younger brother, Kevin, 4 years my junior, somehow always managed to get the better end of every situation. When we were kids, his birthday parties featured bounce houses and professional entertainers, while mine typically consisted of pizza and a movie. For Christmas, Kevin would receive the latest gaming console or expensive electronics, while I would get practical items like clothes or school supplies. I never understood what created this disparity. Maybe it was because Kevin was more outgoing and charismatic, always putting on performances and making people laugh. Perhaps it was because he struggled more in school, requiring more attention and support. Whatever the reason, the pattern continued throughout our childhood and teenage years. When it came time for college, I received minimal financial support from my parents. They contributed about $5,000 total over 4 years, claiming they simply could not afford more. I worked 2, sometimes 3 jobs while maintaining a full course load. Summers were spent working instead of relaxing. I graduated with student loans, but significantly less than most of my peers thanks to my constant work ethic. Kevin, on the other hand, had his entire undergraduate education funded. My parents took out a second mortgage to cover his expenses, including a comfortable apartment off campus rather than dorm living. When he changed majors 3 times, extending his college years, they continued supporting him without complaint. Despite these disparities, I persevered. After college, I worked for 2 years at a title company to save money for law school. Law school was entirely self-funded through a combination of scholarships, loans, and continuing to work part-time. I specialized in real estate law, finding satisfaction in helping people navigate one of the biggest investments of their lives. By age 29, I had established myself at a reputable firm in Grand Rapids. My hard work was paying off with a stable income and growing client base. That was when I decided to buy my first house, a milestone I had been dreaming of for years. The property I found was not impressive at first glance. A 1960s ranch-style home with 3 bedrooms, it had been neglected for years. The previous owners were an elderly couple who had been unable to maintain it properly before moving to assisted living. The carpets were stained. The kitchen was straight out of the 70s, with avocado green appliances, and the single bathroom featured pink tile that had seen better days. But beneath the outdated aesthetics and neglect, I saw potential. The structure was sound, the roof relatively new, and the location excellent, just 15 minutes from downtown in a quiet neighborhood with mature trees. At $180,000, it was within my budget while leaving funds for renovations. For the next 2 years, every weekend and many evenings were dedicated to transforming the house. I learned plumbing and electrical basics from online videos and workshops at the local hardware store. I demolished the kitchen myself, salvaging what materials I could to save money. The bathroom renovation took 6 weeks of showering at my gym. I replaced every inch of flooring, painted every wall, updated fixtures, and landscaped the previously overgrown yard. By the time I finished the major renovations, I had invested approximately $60,000 and countless hours of labor. The result was a home that reflected my personal style and needs. The kitchen now featured custom cabinets I had built with a friend who was a carpenter, quartz countertops I found on clearance, and energy-efficient stainless steel appliances purchased during seasonal sales. The bathroom was transformed with a walk-in shower, modern vanity, and neutral tiles that would stand the test of time. The 3rd bedroom became my home office with built-in bookshelves and a custom desk that spanned one wall. The backyard now featured a wooden deck I had designed and built myself perfect for summer barbecues and morning coffee. This house represented more than just property to me. It was physical proof of my independence and success achieved without handouts or special treatment. Every corner held memories of problems solved and skills learned. I had transformed it with my own hands, much as I had built my career and life through persistent effort. During this time, my relationship with my family remained cordial but distant. I visited for major holidays and called my parents every couple of weeks. Kevin had pursued a career in sales, moving between companies frequently. He married his college girlfriend Amanda shortly after graduation, and they quickly had 2 children, a boy and a girl, now aged 7 and 5. My parents retired when I was 32 with modest savings, and their house finally paid off. They seemed content with their simple lifestyle, occasionally traveling to visit friends or taking short domestic vacations. They frequently babysit for Kevin and Amanda, delighting in their role as grandparents. Last year, I heard through family conversations that Kevin and Amanda were having marital problems. The details were vague, but it appeared to involve financial stress and potential infidelity on his part. I kept my distance from the situation, having learned long ago that inserting myself into Kevin's problems only led to somehow being blamed for them. 3 months ago, their divorce was finalized. Kevin moved into a small apartment, while Amanda remained in their rented house with the children. Child support and shared custody arrangements were established, though I gathered from my parents that Kevin was already struggling to meet his financial obligations. Around this same time, I noticed an increase in family contact. My parents called more frequently, often mentioning they were in my neighborhood and asking to stop by. These visits always included extensive compliments about my house, questions about the neighborhood, and comments about how much space I had for just one person. Kevin also began reaching out more, suggesting we rebuild our brotherly bond. After years of minimal contact, these sudden efforts struck me as unusual, but I cautiously welcomed the apparent desire to improve our relationship. During his visits, he would often comment on specific features of my home, asking detailed questions about the renovation costs and current property values in the area. 2 weeks ago, my father called with an unusually formal request. He asked if we could have a family meeting at my house the following Sunday afternoon. When I inquired about the purpose, he vaguely mentioned some important family matters that needed discussion. Something in his tone made me uneasy, but I agreed, thinking perhaps they wanted to discuss healthcare directives or other retirement concerns. As the day approached, my parents called twice more to confirm the meeting, emphasizing that Kevin would also be attending and that it was extremely important that we all be present. The seriousness in their tone triggered mild anxiety, but I could never have anticipated what they actually had in mind. The Sunday of our family meeting arrived with perfect early autumn weather. I spent the morning cleaning my already tidy house, vacuuming the hardwood floors, and dusting the shelves lined with law books and framed photographs. Though my parents had not mentioned food, I prepared a simple spread of cheese crackers, fruit, and homemade cookies, along with coffee and tea options. I wanted everyone to feel comfortable despite my lingering unease about the mysterious agenda. At precisely 2 in the afternoon, the doorbell rang. I opened the door to find not just my parents and Kevin, but also his 2 children, Ethan and Sophie. This was unexpected, as no one had mentioned the kids would be joining us. Kevin stood behind them with an overnight bag slung over his shoulder, as though they were planning to stay. My mother hugged me tightly. "Your home looks absolutely beautiful, Tyler. You have done such amazing work here," she said, her eyes scanning the entryway and living room beyond. My father clapped me on the shoulder with unusual enthusiasm. "Son, this place gets better every time we visit. You have created something special here." Kevin guided his children inside, not meeting my eyes directly. "Kids, this is Uncle Tyler's house. What do you think?" 7-year-old Ethan looked around with wide eyes. "It is bigger than our apartment." 5-year-old Sophie nodded in agreement. "Do you have a playroom, Uncle Tyler?" Before I could answer, Kevin interjected. "Maybe you will have your own rooms here someday. Would you like that?" The comment struck me as odd, but I brushed it aside, attributing it to casual conversation. I showed everyone to the living room, where I had arranged seating and placed the refreshments on the coffee table. The children immediately gravitated toward the cookies, while the adults settled into the couches and armchairs. "So what is this important family discussion about?" I asked, pouring coffee for my parents and offering Kevin a drink. My father cleared his throat and sat up straighter, adopting what I recognized as his business meeting posture from when he would practice presentations at home during his working years. "We thought it would be best to discuss this all together as a family unit." My mother nodded in agreement, her hands folded primly in her lap. Family is the most important thing after all. Kevin had positioned himself in my favorite reading chair, the one with the best view of the backyard. He was running his hand along the arm of the chair, almost possessively. "The kids really need stability right now, with everything they have been going through with the divorce." I noticed him exchanging glances with my parents, a look of shared understanding passing between them that excluded me. The atmosphere in the room had shifted from casual family gathering to something more formal and tense. My father kept straightening his shirt collar, a nervous habit from his working days, when he was about to deliver difficult news to his team. "Tyler," my mother began, "you have done so well for yourself. Your career is thriving, and this house is absolutely wonderful. We are so proud of how you have established yourself," my father added, though his tone lacked the warmth such a statement should carry. Kevin nodded along then, said, "Not everyone has been as fortunate, though. Some of us have had some setbacks." My parents looked at Kevin with such sympathy that I felt a twist of discomfort in my stomach. I had seen this dynamic countless times growing up, the rallying around Kevin whenever he faced consequences of his own making. "These past few months have been very challenging," my mother said, reaching over to pat Kevin's knee. "With the divorce and having to move out of his house, Kevin has been struggling to provide the kind of home his children deserve." My father nodded solemnly. "Family legacies and supporting the next generation are what truly matter in life. Property is just property, but what we do with it can make all the difference for our loved ones." Kevin jumped in. "The apartment I am renting barely has room for the three of us when I have the kids. Ethan and Sophie are sharing a tiny bedroom. It is no way for children to live." The children, who had been quietly eating cookies and seemingly ignoring the adult conversation, perked up at the mention of their names. "I want my own room," Ethan declared, "with space for my Lego table." Sophie nodded enthusiastically. "And I want pink walls and a princess bed." Kevin smiled at his children, then looked pointedly around my living room. A house like this would give them exactly what they need: room to grow and be happy. The direction of the conversation was becoming clearer, sending a chill down my spine. My father suggested we all move to the dining room table to discuss matters properly. As we relocated, I noticed Kevin taking a detour through the hallway, opening doors and peering into rooms as if conducting an inspection. The children followed him, pointing at things and whispering. Once we were all seated at the dining table, my father folded his hands in front of him like he was about to begin a formal meeting. My mother sat beside him, nervously adjusting her necklace. Kevin positioned the children on either side of him, an obvious visual reminder of his parental status. "Tyler," my father began in a tone that tried and failed to sound casual, "we have been discussing as a family how we might address Kevin's housing situation in a way that benefits everyone." My mother jumped in. "We believe we have come up with the perfect solution that keeps property in the family while providing for the next generation." Kevin nodded eagerly, his eyes not meeting mine but instead continuing to scan the dining room, assessing it like a property he was considering purchasing. The uncomfortable feeling in my stomach intensified as I realized they had been planning this conversation for some time, coordinating their approach. The frequency of their recent visits took on new meaning, as did their unusual interest in my home's features and value. They had been evaluating my house not with admiration but with calculation. "What exactly are you suggesting?" I asked, though I was beginning to suspect the answer. My father looked at my mother, then at Kevin, before turning back to me with what he clearly thought was a reasonable expression. "We believe the most sensible solution would be for you to give this house to Kevin and the children." I am sorry what I asked, certain I had misheard. The dining room suddenly felt airless, as though all oxygen had been sucked out in an instant. My father maintained his business-like demeanor. "We think you should sign over your house to Kevin. He needs a stable home for the children, and you are in a position to provide that." This house would be perfect for them, my mother added, gesturing around the dining room. 3 bedrooms, the nice backyard for the children to play in the excellent school district. It makes perfect sense. I stared at them, waiting for someone to crack a smile and reveal this was an elaborate joke. No one did. Instead, Kevin nodded along with my parents' words, while his children began discussing which bedrooms would be theirs. "I want the big one at the end of the hall," Ethan announced. "That is Tyler's master bedroom," my mother told him with an indulgent smile. "But I am sure once Uncle Tyler moves his things out, your daddy can help you set it up however you like." "Moves his things out," I echoed, my voice sounding distant to my own ears. "You cannot be serious. This is my home. I bought it. I renovated it. I paid for it." My father frowned slightly, as though I was being unnecessarily difficult. "Now, Tyler, we understand this would be an adjustment, but family needs to support family. Kevin is going through a difficult time, and he has the children to consider." "And where exactly am I supposed to live?" I asked, still struggling to process the audacity of their proposal. "You could easily find an apartment," my mother suggested brightly. "With your income, it would be no problem at all. You are just one person after all. You do not need all this space." Kevin finally spoke directly to me. "It would only be temporary until I get back on my feet, maybe a year or 2. The casual way he suggested I should surrender my home for a year or 2 struck me as so disconnected from reality that I nearly laughed. I had spent 2 years renovating this house, customizing every detail to my preferences and needs. The idea that I should simply walk away from it because my brother had once again created problems for himself was beyond comprehension. "This is not happening," I said firmly. "I am not giving away my house. Not to Kevin, not to anyone." My father's expression hardened. "We are not asking you to give it away. We are asking you to give it to family. There is a difference. A huge difference," my mother emphasized. "This stays in the family. It is not like you are losing it." "Except I would be losing it," I countered. "I would no longer own the home I worked for years to buy and renovate. I would no longer live in it. How is that not losing it?" Kevin leaned forward, his tone taking on an edge I recognized from childhood arguments when he did not get his way. "You always were selfish, Tyler. Some things are more important than property, like family, like my kids having a stable home." "My selfishness is not the issue here," I said, struggling to maintain my composure. "The issue is that you all came into my home and announced your expectation that I should give it to Kevin without any prior discussion, without considering my feelings or my rights as the owner." My father waved his hand dismissively. "We are discussing it now, and we have considered everything carefully. This is the most logical solution." "Logical for whom?" I demanded. "Certainly not for me." "You make good money," my mother pointed out. "You can buy another house. Kevin cannot afford to buy any house right now." "That is not my problem to solve," I replied. "I sympathize with his situation, but giving him my house is not the answer." Kevin's face flushed with anger. "Not your problem. We are family. My problems are your problems. That is how it works." I shook my head. "No, that is not how it works. Not when the solution involves me giving up something this significant." The conversation continued to deteriorate from there. My parents took turns explaining why this plan made perfect sense from their perspective. They pointed out that Kevin had children, while I did not, suggesting this somehow entitled him to my property. They reminded me of times they had supported me growing up conveniently, forgetting the vast disparity in how they had treated their 2 sons. As the argument escalated, certain revelations emerged that made the situation even more disturbing. Kevin mentioned that he had already told his children they would be moving into a big new house soon. My mother admitted they had spoken to their friend Margaret, a realtor, about the potential transfer of property within the family and what paperwork would be involved. Most shocking was when Ethan innocently asked Daddy, "Can we paint my new room blue like you promised?" "Of course, buddy," Kevin replied. "Once the house is ours, we can make any changes we want." The casual confidence with which he said this and the clear indication that these discussions and promises had been happening for some time hit me like a physical blow. This was not a spontaneous suggestion. but a calculated plan they had been developing behind my back for weeks, if not months. "How long have you been planning this?" I asked, my voice quiet with controlled anger. My parents exchanged uncomfortable glances. My father finally answered. "We started discussing options when Kevin's divorce was finalized 3 months ago." 3 months, I repeated. "For 3 months you have been planning to take my house, all while visiting me here, accepting my hospitality, commenting on my renovations." "Do not be dramatic, Tyler," my mother scolded. "No one is taking anything. We are asking you to help your brother during a difficult time." By giving him my house, I clarified. The house I spent years saving for, months searching for, and 2 years renovating with my own hands. "You are a lawyer," my father said, as though this was relevant. "You understand how property transfers work. It would be simple paperwork for you." I stood up from the table, no longer able to contain my anger. "The simplicity of the paperwork is not the issue. The issue is that you came into my home with the expectation that I would sign it over to Kevin because he needs it more than I do in your estimation. That is not how property ownership works. That is not how respect works." Kevin stood as well, his face contorted with the familiar expression of thwarted entitlement I remembered from our childhood. "You have always been like this. Always keeping score, always holding back from helping family. I have children, Tyler. Does that mean nothing to you?" "Your children are not my responsibility," I replied calmly. "And your housing situation is not my problem to solve, especially not at the cost of my own home." My mother began to cry, a tactic I had seen countless times when family disagreements did not go her way. "I cannot believe you would be so cruel to your own brother and his innocent children." My father stood and put his arm around her. "I think we should leave. Clearly, Tyler needs time to think about his priorities and what family really means." Kevin gathered his children, who looked confused by the tension in the room. "Come on, kids. Uncle Tyler needs some time to think about whether he wants to be part of this family." As they moved toward the door, my father turned back to me. "We will talk again when you have had time to consider what is right. I raised you better than this, Tyler." The irony of that statement was not lost on me, but I chose not to respond. Instead, I held the door open as they filed out, Kevin pausing at the threshold to deliver one final jab. "I always knew you were selfish, but I never thought you would put a house before your own family," he said. "Think about my kids, Tyler. If not for me, then for them." When the door closed behind them, the silence in my house felt deafening. I returned to the dining room and mechanically cleared away the untouched food and drinks, my mind replaying the surreal conversation. It seemed impossible that my family had actually expected me to simply hand over my home because Kevin needed it more in their estimation. But as the shock began to wear off, I realized this request was perfectly in line with the family dynamic that had existed my entire life. Kevin's needs always came first. Kevin's problems were always more important. The only difference was the scale of what they were asking for this time. The first night after the family meeting, I barely slept. I sat in my living room until dawn, looking around at the space I had created, remembering the countless hours of work that went into each detail. The built-in bookshelf that had taken 3 weekends to construct. The hardwood floors I had refinished by hand, sanding until my arms ached. The kitchen backsplash I had installed tile by tile. This house was more than property to me. It was a physical manifestation of my hard work, independence, and personal achievement. By morning, my shock had transformed into a simmering anger. I went to work distracted, unable to focus on client files. My assistant noticed my unusual demeanor but respectfully kept her distance after I brushed off her concerned inquiries. At lunch, my phone began buzzing with text messages from extended family members. An aunt I rarely spoke with asked why I was being so difficult about helping Kevin out. A cousin questioned whether I really needed such a big house for just one person. It became clear that my parents had wasted no time in sharing their version of events with the wider family circle. By evening, my voicemail was full of messages. My mother had called 3 times, each message more emotional than the last, varying between guilt trips about family obligation and thinly veiled suggestions that I was being selfish. My father's single message was curt: stating simply that we needed to resolve this situation like adults. Kevin had texted repeatedly throughout the day, his messages growing increasingly hostile. The kids are devastated. They were so excited about their new rooms. How can you sleep at night knowing your niece and nephew are crammed into a tiny apartment while you have empty bedrooms? You always were the selfish one. Some things never change. I did not respond to any of the messages, needing time to process my thoughts and determine the best path forward. That night around 9:30, I heard a car door slam outside my house. Peering through the blinds, I recognized Kevin's sedan parked across the street. He sat inside for nearly 20 minutes, engine off, just watching my house. Eventually, he drove away without approaching. The incident left me feeling unsettled and somewhat violated. The following day brought more of the same. Colleagues at work noticed my distraction. Martin, a fellow attorney who specialized in family law, pulled me aside after a meeting. "You seem off, Tyler. Everything okay?" I gave him a brief, sanitized version of the situation. His eyebrows rose higher with each detail. "They expected you to just give your brother your house. Just like that. Apparently I confirmed. And now they are making me out to be the villain for refusing." Martin shook his head in disbelief. "Family can be something else. Let me know if you need anything, even just someone to vent to." I appreciated his support, but I was still processing too much to delve deeper into the conversation. I thanked him and retreated to my office, where I found 3 more voicemails from family members. I rarely spoke, with all expressing disappointment in my unwillingness to help family in need. That evening I arrived home to find Kevin's car in my driveway, blocking me from pulling in. He was standing on my porch, arms crossed. I parked on the street and approached, cautiously aware of neighbors who might witness whatever was about to unfold. "We need to talk," Kevin stated flatly as I reached the steps. "Not like this," I replied. "Not with you showing up unannounced at my home. Our parents raised us to value family above all else," he said, ignoring my response. "I have always looked up to you, Tyler. I thought you were someone who understood what matters." "What matters is respect," I countered. "Respect for boundaries, respect for property rights, respect for the years of work I put into this house." Kevin scoffed. "Property rights. Listen to yourself. This is family we are talking about, not some legal transaction." "It is both," I said firmly. "You are asking for a legal transfer of property worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. I am asking for help from my brother," he shouted, his composure cracking. "My kids need stability. They need a home." "They have a home," I pointed out. "Your apartment may not be ideal, but it is a roof over their heads. Many people raise children in apartments." "They deserve better," Kevin insisted. "They deserve this." He gestured at my house. "Why this house?" "Specifically," I asked. "Why not ask our parents to help you with a down payment on a different house? Why does it have to be my home?" Kevin's expression shifted subtly, a flicker of something calculating crossing his features before he composed himself. "This neighborhood is perfect for the kids. The schools are excellent. It is close to our parents for childcare help." His answer seemed rehearsed, lacking genuine emotion. I pushed further. "If our parents are so concerned about your housing situation, why are not they offering solutions? They own their home outright. They could sell it and help you buy something." Kevin's face flushed. "Their house is their retirement security. They cannot just give that up." "But I should give up my house," I challenged. "My home is somehow less important than theirs." "You do not have kids," he exclaimed, as though this was the ultimate trump card. "What do you need all this space for?" Before I could respond, a neighbor walking his dog slowed his pace, clearly interested in our increasingly heated exchange. I lowered my voice. "This conversation is over, Kevin. Please leave my property." "Our parents were right," he spat. "You have always been selfish, always looking out for number one. Leave now, or I will call the police and report you for trespassing," I said calmly. He glared at me for a long moment before stalking back to his car. As he pulled away, he rolled down his window and shouted, "This is not over, Tyler." The confrontation left me shaken. Kevin's behavior seemed excessive, even for him, suggesting there was more to this situation than simply needing a larger home for his children. His reaction to my suggestion that our parents could sell their house was particularly telling. There was a deeper agenda at work, and I was determined to uncover it. The next morning, I installed a security camera at my front door, linking it to an app on my phone. Given Kevin's unpredictable behavior, it seemed a necessary precaution. I also changed the locks, realizing with concern that my parents had a spare key I had given them for emergencies years ago. By the end of the week, the situation had escalated further. Kevin showed up at my workplace, creating a scene in the reception area that required security to intervene. He told anyone who would listen that I was denying housing to my niece and nephew out of spite. Several colleagues witnessed the embarrassing display, including partners at the firm. That night, I received a call from my Aunt Barbara, my mother's sister, and the family member I had always felt closest to. Unlike the other relatives who had contacted me, she began by asking for my version of events. I explained everything in detail, including the ambush nature of the family meeting and the subsequent harassment. "That does not sound like the full story I heard from your mother," Aunt Barbara said thoughtfully. "She made it sound like you had previously discussed this arrangement and then suddenly changed your mind." "Absolutely not," I assured her. "The first I heard of this plan was when they announced it in my dining room, having already told the children they would be moving in." Aunt Barbara was quiet for a moment. "You know, Tyler, something similar happened years ago with your grandmother's jewelry. Your mother told everyone that your grandmother had promised certain pieces to Kevin's wife as wedding gifts, when in fact no such conversation had ever occurred. Your grandmother was quite upset about it." This revelation added another layer to my understanding of the situation. The pattern of behavior extended beyond my immediate family dynamic and suggested a troubling willingness to misrepresent reality to achieve desired outcomes. "What should I do, Aunt Barbara?" I asked, grateful for a family member who seemed to understand my position. "Protect yourself," she advised without hesitation. "I love your parents and Kevin, but this behavior is not acceptable. You need to establish clear boundaries and possibly seek legal protection." Her words reinforced what I had already been considering. After we ended the call, I sat at my desk and began researching options for protecting my property from future claims or pressure. As a real estate attorney, I was familiar with various forms of property ownership and transfer restrictions, but I had never thought I would need to apply this knowledge to protect my home from my own family. The following day brought another disturbing development. I received an email from a local realtor confirming an appointment to evaluate my home for a potential listing. I had made no such appointment. When I called the realtor to clarify, she explained that she had been contacted by Kevin, who claimed to be helping me sell my house and needed a market valuation. This unauthorized action crossed a line from emotional manipulation into potential fraud. I immediately called Kevin and left a voicemail making it clear that any further misrepresentation of his authority regarding my property would result in legal action. I also contacted the realtor to explain the situation and ensure no further communication occurred without my direct involvement. That weekend, I noticed Kevin's car driving slowly past my house 3 separate times. The security camera captured him walking up to my porch late Saturday night, peering through windows before leaving when a neighbor's motion sensor light activated. Sleep became elusive. I found myself checking the security camera app multiple times during the night, startling at every sound. The stress began affecting my work performance, and I realized I could not continue in this holding pattern. I needed to take definitive action to protect my property and my peace of mind. Monday morning, I arrived at work early and sought out Christine, a colleague who specialized in trust and estate law. Her expertise in asset protection strategies would be valuable in my increasingly complicated situation. "An irrevocable trust," Christine repeated after I explained what I was looking for. "That is quite a significant step, Tyler. Once you place your home in such a trust, you cannot simply change your mind later." "I understand," I assured her. "But given the circumstances, I need something that will provide absolute protection from family pressure or claims." Christine nodded thoughtfully. "An irrevocable trust would certainly accomplish that. Once the property is in the trust, you no longer technically own it, though you can continue to use and enjoy it according to the trust terms. It would make it legally impossible for you to transfer the house to your brother, even if you later decided you wanted to." "That is exactly what I need," I said. something that takes the decision completely out of my hands. She pulled out a legal pad and began taking notes. We would need to establish clear terms for the trust. You would name trustees other than yourself, possibly including a corporate trustee for additional protection. We would define the beneficiaries and conditions for eventual distribution of the property. How quickly can we set this up? I asked. For something this important, we should not rush, Christine cautioned. However, given the situation you have described, I understand the urgency. If we focus exclusively on this, we could potentially have everything prepared within 2 weeks. 2 weeks seemed like an eternity given the ongoing pressure from my family, but I recognized the need for thoroughness in establishing a legal structure that would provide lasting protection. Let us proceed, I decided. In the meantime, is there any temporary protection I can put in place? Christine suggested filing a formal letter with the county recorder's office, stating that any property transfers would require specific verification protocols. While not foolproof, it would create an additional hurdle against fraudulent attempts to transfer the property. Over the next several days, I gathered all documentation related to my home: the original purchase agreement, mortgage documents, records of all renovations and improvements, property tax assessments, and current market valuations. Christine had emphasized the importance of establishing clear documentation of the property's value and my sole ownership before transferring it into the trust. I also met with a financial advisor to discuss the broader implications of placing my primary residence in an irrevocable trust. We reviewed potential tax consequences, impact on future borrowing ability, and strategies for managing the property through the trust structure. You will need to carefully select your trustees, the financial advisor emphasized. These individuals will have significant control over the property, even though you will continue living there. They need to be people you trust implicitly, who cannot be pressured by your family. I considered my options carefully. Martin, my colleague from the family law department, was someone I respected and trusted. As an attorney, he understood fiduciary responsibility and would not be easily swayed by emotional appeals. For the second trustee, I thought of my mentor from law school, Professor Raymond, who had always demonstrated impeccable ethics and judgment. The corporate trustee role would be filled by a trust company Christine recommended, providing an institutional layer of protection and continuity, regardless of individual trustee availability. With these decisions made, Christine began drafting the trust documents. The process required careful consideration of every detail, from defining acceptable property uses to establishing protocols for maintenance expenses and eventual disposition. While the legal work progressed, I took additional steps to secure my home physically. I upgraded to a comprehensive security system with motion sensors and cameras covering all entry points. I installed new, more secure locks on all doors and windows. I even consulted with a security specialist who advised strategic landscaping changes to improve visibility and reduce potential hiding spots around the property. Throughout this period, the pressure from my family continued unabated. My parents called daily, alternating between guilt trips and expressions of disappointment. Kevin's approach became more erratic, swinging between angry accusations and sudden attempts at reconciliation that felt manipulative and insincere. "Maybe we can work something out," he suggested during one call. "What if I buy the house from you? You could finance it for me with very low payments for the first few years until I get back on my feet." The proposal was financially absurd, essentially asking me to give him the house while pretending it was a legitimate transaction. I declined politely, but firmly reiterating that the house was not available for transfer under any circumstances. "You are making a huge mistake," he warned. "Our parents are incredibly disappointed in you. Is that what you want? To hurt them like this in their retirement years?" The emotional manipulation was becoming more sophisticated, targeting what they perceived as my vulnerabilities. What they failed to understand was that each attempt only strengthened my resolve and confirmed I was making the right decision. 2 weeks after my initial consultation with Christine, the trust documents were ready for review. We spent an entire afternoon going through every clause, ensuring I fully understood the implications of establishing the irrevocable trust. "Once you sign these papers and we record the deed transferring the property to the trust, there is no going back," Christine emphasized. "The house will no longer be yours to sell or give away. You will be a beneficiary of the trust with the right to live in the property, but the trustees will have legal control. I understand completely, I assured her. That is exactly the protection I need. The following day, Martin and Professor Raymond joined us to review their responsibilities as trustees. Both had agreed to serve in this capacity after hearing a summarized version of the situation. The corporate trustee representative participated via video conference, explaining their role in maintaining trust records and ensuring compliance with all legal requirements. As we finalized the preparations, I felt a growing sense of relief. For the first time since the disastrous family meeting, I was taking proactive steps rather than merely reacting to my family's demands and manipulations. The trust would create an immovable barrier against their pressure, one that could not be overcome by guilt trips or emotional appeals. The day we signed the trust documents and filed the new deed, I felt as though a weight had been lifted. The house was now legally held by the Tyler Bennett Residential Trust, with clear provisions for my continued residence and eventual disposition of the property, according to my wishes, not anyone else's demands. Christine provided me with formal letters to send to my family members explaining in legal terminology that the property had been placed in an irrevocable trust and was no longer available for transfer under any circumstances. The letters were carefully worded to be factual rather than confrontational, simply stating the new legal reality. Now what I asked Christine as we left the county recorder's office. Now you invite them to a meeting, she suggested, on neutral ground, not in your home, and I strongly recommend having legal representation present. The prospect of another family confrontation was daunting, but I recognized the necessity of formally communicating the new situation. It was time to reclaim control of the narrative and establish clear boundaries for moving forward. I selected a private dining room at a local restaurant for the meeting, somewhere public enough to discourage extreme behavior, but private enough for a candid conversation. I invited my parents and Kevin via formal email, stating only that I wished to discuss the house situation and reach a resolution. I did not mention the trust or my attorney's presence, wanting to ensure they would actually attend. To my surprise, they all accepted promptly. Perhaps they thought I had reconsidered their proposal. Perhaps they saw this as an opportunity to apply renewed pressure in a public setting where I might feel uncomfortable creating a scene. Whatever their reasoning, the meeting was set for Saturday afternoon. I arrived 30 minutes early with Martin, who had agreed to attend as both my attorney and as one of the trustees. We selected seats facing the door and arranged the table so that water glasses and bread baskets would not obstruct the recording device Martin had brought. Michigan being a one-party consent state for recordings, we were within our legal rights to document the conversation without informing the others. My parents arrived precisely on time, looking somber but determined. Kevin arrived 3 minutes later, his expression shifting from confidence to confusion when he spotted Martin sitting beside me. "Who is this?" he demanded immediately. "This is Martin Greenberg, my attorney, and a trustee of my residential property trust," I replied calmly. "He is here in both capacities today." My father's eyebrows shot up. "Trustee, what are you talking about, Tyler?" "Please sit down," I gestured to the chairs across from us. "I will explain everything." My mother glanced nervously at Martin. "Is this really necessary? Having a lawyer at a family discussion?" "Given the nature of our last family discussion, yes, I believe it is," I replied. Once they were seated, I wasted no time getting to the point. 2 weeks ago, I established an irrevocable trust and transferred my home into it. The trust has 3 trustees. Martin here, my law school mentor, Professor Raymond and Midwest Trust Company, as the corporate trustee. I am the primary beneficiary with lifetime residential rights. Kevin's face flushed with anger. "What does that legal gibberish mean?" Martin answered for me. "It means that Tyler no longer personally owns the house. It is owned by the trust. By the terms of the trust agreement, the property cannot be sold, transferred, or otherwise disposed of except under very specific conditions that do not include transferring it to family members." "You cannot do that," Kevin exclaimed, his voice rising. "That is our family home." "Actually, he absolutely can do that, and he has," Martin replied evenly. "And I must correct you on one point. It is not your family home. It was Tyler's personal property purchased with his own funds and is now held in trust for his benefit. My father leaned forward, his business negotiation face firmly in place. Surely this can be undone. Trusts can be dissolved. Not this type, Martin explained. As the name suggests, an irrevocable trust cannot be revoked once established. The property will remain in trust according to the terms established in the trust document. Tyler, my mother said, her voice trembling with either genuine emotion or a practiced performance, why would you do this? Why would you make it impossible to help your brother? I did this because I was left with no choice, I replied. After our last meeting, it became clear that the pressure to transfer my home to Kevin would continue indefinitely. This provides a definitive resolution to the matter. Kevin slammed his hand on the table, causing the water glasses to jump. This is ridiculous. You are hiding behind legal tricks to avoid helping family. Martin remained perfectly calm. Mr. Bennett, I would advise moderating your tone and behavior. We are in a public establishment, and outbursts will not help resolve the situation. Who asked you? Kevin snapped at him before turning back to me. You have always been like this, Tyler. Always finding ways to put yourself first. That is not true, I said quietly. In fact, throughout our lives, I have repeatedly stepped aside while you received preferential treatment. This house represents years of my hard work and personal sacrifice. It is the one thing I have not been willing to give up for you. My father shook his head dismissively. Ancient history. We are talking about the present situation. Kevin needs help now. And I would have been willing to help in many ways, I countered. I could have assisted with finding affordable housing. I could have helped with job connections. What I was not willing to do was give up my home. The children need stability, my mother insisted. They need a proper home with a yard and their own rooms. Many children grow up in apartments, I pointed out. The issue here is not really about what the children need. It is about what Kevin wants. Kevin's face contorted with anger. You have no idea what my children need. You do not have kids. You have never had to struggle like I have. Something in his phrasing caught my attention. Struggle like you have, Kevin. You have received support from our parents your entire life. They paid for your college. They helped with your wedding. They babysit your children regularly. What exactly has been your great struggle? You know nothing about my life, he shouted. Do you have any idea how hard it is being divorced, paying child support, trying to maintain 2 households? Those are consequences of your own choices, I replied calmly. Your divorce was not my doing. Your financial situation is not my responsibility to fix, especially not at the cost of my home. My father tried a different approach. Tyler, be reasonable. What Kevin is going through affects all of us as a family. His children are your niece and nephew. Do not you want what is best for them? Of course I do, I agreed. But giving up my home is not the solution. And frankly, I am not convinced that is what this is really about. What is that supposed to mean? Kevin demanded. I leaned forward slightly. Tell me honestly, Kevin. If I had agreed to give you my house, what were your plans for it long term? A flicker of something passed across his face, too quick to identify, but enough to confirm my suspicions. I told you, he said defensively, to provide a stable home for my children. And you would have lived there indefinitely, I pressed. No plans to sell it once you had clear title? Kevin's hesitation was brief but telling. My mother jumped in quickly. Of course he would live there. That was the whole point. But I kept my eyes on Kevin, who could not quite meet my gaze. The property values in my neighborhood have increased significantly since I purchased and renovated. The house is likely worth at least $100,000 more than what I paid originally. That equity would be quite tempting for someone in financial difficulty, would not it? You are being paranoid, Kevin scoffed, but his eyes darted away. Martin cleared his throat. Actually, we took the liberty of checking recent credit reports and court filings. Mr. Kevin Bennett currently has 3 outstanding civil judgments against him for unpaid debts, and his credit report shows multiple accounts in collections. His financial situation appears significantly more precarious than simply struggling with divorce expenses. Kevin's face went from red to white. You had no right to dig into my personal finances. We had every right to investigate potential motivations when significant property interests were at stake, Martin replied calmly. My father looked genuinely confused. Kevin, what is he talking about? What judgments? Kevin shifted uncomfortably. Just some business deals that did not work out. Nothing important. $28,000 in unpaid business loans is quite significant, Martin noted, as is $15,000 in credit card debt currently in collections. My mother turned to Kevin in shock. You never mentioned any of this. It was not relevant, Kevin muttered. It seems extremely relevant when you are asking for a house worth over $300,000, I pointed out. Were you planning to take out a home equity loan once the property was in your name? Or perhaps sell it outright? Kevin's silence was all the confirmation needed. My parents looked between us, their expressions suggesting they were processing this new information. The point is moot now anyway, Martin interjected smoothly. The property is in an irrevocable trust. It cannot be transferred to Kevin or anyone else outside the specific terms of the trust. This is not over, Kevin declared, standing abruptly. There must be a way to break this trust thing. There is not, Martin assured him. And any attempt to contest the trust would only result in significant legal expenses with no possibility of success. We will see about that, Kevin threatened, but his bravado sounded hollow. As he stormed out of the private dining room, my parents remained seated, looking suddenly older and uncertain. We did not know about Kevin's financial problems, my father said quietly. He told us he was managing fine aside from the adjustment to paying child support. Did you ever actually ask him directly about his finances before suggesting he should have my house? I asked. They exchanged uncomfortable glances. We took him at his word, my mother admitted. Just as you have always done, I noted, without malice, simply stating a pattern I had observed throughout our lives. Perhaps we should have asked more questions, my father acknowledged reluctantly. The admission, small as it was, felt like a significant shift. For perhaps the first time they were seeing Kevin's situation with clearer eyes, not automatically accepting his narrative or prioritizing his needs above all else. I hope you understand now why I had to take these steps to protect my property, I said. This was never about refusing to help family. It was about preventing my home from being taken under false pretenses. My mother dabbed at her eyes with a napkin. We never meant to take anything from you, Tyler. We truly thought this was a solution that would help everyone. By having me give up my home, I reminded her gently, that would not have helped me at all. I suppose we did not think through all the implications, my father admitted. No, I agreed. You did not. The conversation continued for another hour, more measured and honest than any discussion we had had in years. My parents began to acknowledge, however, reluctantly, that their approach had been fundamentally unfair. They expressed regret for how the situation had been handled, though they stopped short of apologizing directly for the request itself. As we prepared to leave, my father asked, "Where do we go from here, Tyler?" "That depends on whether you can respect my boundaries going forward," I replied. "I am willing to maintain a relationship, but only if my property and my choices are respected." "And Kevin?" my mother asked. "That is up to him," I said honestly. "But I will not tolerate further harassment or attempts to pressure me about my house." They nodded soberly, the reality of the new family dynamic settling in. As Martin and I watched them leave, he commented, "Family situations are always the most complicated. Do you think anything will change?" "With Kevin, probably not," I admitted. "But with my parents, maybe. For the first time, they might be seeing the pattern more clearly. Whether this insight would lead to lasting change remained to be seen, but I had taken the necessary steps to protect myself regardless of what came next. The house was secure in the trust, and with it my peace of mind. In the days following our confrontation at the restaurant, an unusual silence fell over my family communications. No calls from my parents, no texts from Kevin, no pressure from extended family members. The abrupt cessation of contact was both a relief and slightly disconcerting after weeks of constant harassment. I used this period of quiet to focus on reclaiming my sense of security and peace in my home. I spent a weekend repainting my office, choosing a new color scheme that felt fresh and energizing. I replaced some of the furniture that carried memories of the family meeting, rearranging the living room to create a new flow and atmosphere. These small changes helped me psychologically reclaim the space as my own. 2 weeks after our meeting, I received a text message from my father. "Your mother and I have been doing some thinking. Can we talk sometime?" I agreed to meet them for lunch the following weekend, specifying a public restaurant to maintain neutral territory. I arrived to find only my parents, no sign of Kevin. They looked tired, but composed, lacking the righteous certainty they had displayed during our previous encounters. "We owe you an apology," my father began once we were seated, surprising me with his directness. "We should never have put you in that position. We got caught up in trying to solve Kevin's problems," my mother added. "We did not stop to think about how unfair our request was to you." Their apology, while welcome, felt somewhat incomplete. They were sorry for how they had approached the situation, but I sensed they still did not fully grasp the deeper issue of the lifetime pattern of favoritism toward Kevin. "What made you reconsider?" I asked. My father hesitated before answering. "After the meeting, we asked Kevin directly about the financial judgments your attorney mentioned. He admitted they were real but tried to minimize their significance. When we pressed for details, he became defensive and eventually stormed out. We started looking more closely at things after that," my mother continued. "We spoke with Amanda, who told us Kevin had been hiding financial problems throughout their marriage. Apparently, his spending habits were a major factor in their divorce. This revelation did not surprise me. Kevin had always lived beyond his means, expecting others to bail him out when consequences caught up with him. We also realized something about ourselves," my father admitted reluctantly. "We have always rushed to fix things for Kevin without holding him accountable. It has not really helped him in the long run." This acknowledgement, however belated, felt significant. It suggested the possibility of a shift in the family dynamic that had defined our relationships for decades. "I appreciate your apology," I said sincerely. "Moving forward, I need to know that my boundaries will be respected." "They will be," my mother promised. "We were wrong to ask you to give up your home. It is yours and you worked hard for it." "What about Kevin?" I asked. "Where does he stand in all this?" My parents exchanged uncomfortable glances. "He is still angry," my father confessed. "He believes you have abandoned the family by not helping him." "That is his perspective," I replied evenly. "My perspective is that I have simply protected what is rightfully mine." "We understand that now," my mother assured me. "We have told Kevin that we will not support any further attempts to pressure you about your house." Whether Kevin would accept this new boundary remained to be seen, but my parents' shift in perspective was a positive development. We finished lunch with cautious conversation about neutral topics. The tension noticeably reduced, though not entirely gone. Over the next 6 months, a new pattern gradually emerged in our family interactions. My parents and I began rebuilding our relationship on more balanced terms. They visited my house occasionally, but these visits now carried a different energy, free from the calculating assessment I had sensed before. They no longer commented on the space or suggested it was excessive for one person. Instead, they simply appreciated it as my home, respecting the work and care I had invested in it. Kevin remained distant, declining to attend any gathering where I would be present. He had apparently found a larger apartment in a different neighborhood and had moved his children there. According to my parents, he was working with a financial counselor to address his debt issues, though whether this was by choice or necessity was unclear. The irrevocable trust continued to serve its purpose, providing both practical protection for my property and psychological reassurance for me. Knowing that my home was legally secure allowed me to focus on other aspects of my life that had been neglected during the family crisis. I began attending a weekly therapy session, working through the complex emotions stirred up by the conflict. The therapist helped me recognize patterns from childhood that had conditioned me to doubt my right to maintain boundaries with family. Through these sessions, I developed stronger skills for asserting my needs without guilt or apology. I also expanded my social circle, reconnecting with old friends and making new ones through community activities. I joined a local recreational basketball league and a book club, creating connections based on shared interests rather than obligation. These relationships, built on mutual respect and choice rather than familial duty, brought a refreshing dynamic to my life. About a year after the trust was established, my parents invited me to dinner at their home. To my surprise, Kevin was also present. The atmosphere was tense but civil. Kevin acknowledged me with a nod but little else. Throughout dinner he remained mostly quiet, offering minimal responses when directly addressed. After dinner, as my parents cleared the table, Kevin and I found ourselves momentarily alone in the living room. "I still think you were wrong," he stated flatly. "Family should help family." "I agree with that principle," I replied calmly. "But help should not require sacrifice of this magnitude from only one party." He shrugged, unwilling to concede the point but also not escalating the argument. "Whatever, it is done now." While far from a reconciliation, this brief exchange marked a shift from active hostility to cold detachment. It was progress of a sort, though I harbored no illusions about rebuilding a close brotherly relationship. As the second anniversary of my home purchase approached, I hosted a small gathering to celebrate. My parents attended, bringing a housewarming gift, as though acknowledging the home as truly mine for the first time. Aunt Barbara came along with colleagues from work and friends from my expanded social circle. Kevin did not attend but had sent a brief text, "Congrats on the house anniversary." The simple acknowledgement, devoid of bitterness or demands, suggested he might finally be accepting the reality of the situation. Whether this acceptance stemmed from genuine growth or merely practical recognition of an immovable obstacle was unclear, but the result was the same peace. Looking around at the people gathered in my living room that evening, I felt a profound sense of gratitude. My home remained my sanctuary, protected by legal structures, but more importantly, by my own willingness to stand firm in the face of pressure. The experience had taught me that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for family is to maintain healthy boundaries, even when doing so is difficult and painful. In the quiet moments after everyone had left, I walked through the rooms of my house, appreciating each space and the memories it held. The kitchen where I had learned to cook increasingly adventurous meals, the office where I built my career, the living room where I now entertained friends who respected and valued me. This house represented more than just property. It embodied my journey toward self-respect and the courage to protect what mattered to me. In refusing to give it away, I had ultimately given myself something far more valuable: the knowledge that I could stand firm in my convictions, even against the people who had known me my entire life. The irrevocable trust had secured my home legally, but the true security came from within, from the personal boundaries I had established and defended. That was a foundation no one could take away, a lesson I would carry forward into all my relationships. Life continues to evolve, as do family dynamics. My parents and I maintain a relationship that, while not perfect, is more honest than before. Kevin and I interact minimally, but without active conflict. And I continue to build a life that reflects my values and priorities, not the expectations of others. Have you ever had to defend your boundaries against family pressure? How did you handle it? Let me know in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more real-life experiences about navigating challenging family dynamics. And if you know someone who might benefit from this story, share it with them. Sometimes knowing we are not alone in these struggles makes all the difference. Thank you for listening, and remember that standing up for yourself is not selfish. It is necessary for authentic relationships.